But before we start, before we kick off, I would like to ask everyone to please stand up. I was told by someone this morning that I should tell a joke, but usually when I tell a joke, I'm the only one laughing. So I'm going to do a slightly different exercise today. I would like to ask all of you to put hands out in front of you and cross your arms. Cross your arms as you would naturally. How does it feel? Comfortable? Natural? When we cross the arms, we are not really actively listening, so I definitely don't want you to take that pose throughout my presentation. But now, let's try something different. Put your arms out in front of you again, and this time, cross your arms the other way. How does it feel now? Uncomfortable? Unnatural? Thank you very much for taking part in this experiment. The reason it feels unnatural and uncomfortable, it's because we haven't formed the habit of doing this, okay? You simply used to this behavior and not really the other one, right? So basically, apparently it takes 250 times to repeat a certain thing to make it a habit. So just when we think about embracing technology and adapting to changes, think about how many times it takes and how possible that is to actually do it. So change is sometimes uncomfortable, and that's something that I will be talking to you about today. So literally within the next 40 minutes, I'm gonna spend time on kicking off with some of the technology trends that we observed that are influencing the workplaces. Then I'm going to move on to the topic of Google culture. I'm going to give you a sneak peek into how we innovate internally and what's the secret sauce, how we motivate our employees, our peers to actually stay innovative. And lastly, I'm going to wrap up with some of the key tips from change management, how to stay innovative and how to make the technology change successful. Sounds like a good plan? Okay, so we've got 40 minutes, and later on we're going to have a dedicated session to Q&A. But actually, if there is something that you would like to tackle, or you have a question, burning question, to any of the topics as I will be going through the content, please feel free to raise your hand and ask the question as I go through the content, okay? I want to make sure that you make the most of the session. Okay, let's kick off. Just a quick comment. By the way, this is the picture from one of the Google offices in London where I'm based. We will talk about creative space and how the physical space influences the way we think. So that's one of the collaboration areas we have in one of our offices. Okay, so I promised you a quick introduction to some of the technology trends. Hopefully that's not going to be anything new to you, but just to give you a little bit more context on how those technology trends influence the way we work. So basically, we are not chained to our desks anymore. Something that you can see on the right-hand side, there are 4 trends that we observe at the moment. First one, we've got 4 generations in the marketplace at the moment. So in the workplace, we've got vets, baby boomers, Gen X and Gen Y. And basically Gen Y, those that we call them millennials, are those who don't know, we call them digital natives as well. They don't know the concept of being offline, like probably most of us in the room, right? So we are very much used to the fact that we book our holidays, we send an assignment, we collaborate, we chat without really moving from our sofa. So basically, these are the trends that are influencing the expectations of those who are entering the workforce at the moment. It's predicted that by 2020, millennials are going to make up 50% of the active workforce. And those people, as they don't know the concept of being offline, as Cisco did a study recently, 48% of millennials would accept a job offer with a better technology than a higher pay, which tells you quite a powerful story. So especially when we talk about attracting talent into organizations, and for you, which means that you're gonna work with some, smarter, innovative and creative peers, but it's also about retaining that talent in the organizations. What we observe right now among new grads, do you know what's the average time that a new grad is willing to spend in one role, doing one thing? Just give me any number. What's the average time they spend in one role? Sorry? That was very close. 18 months. 18 months is basically estimated as an average time. So when you think about it, some of the trends that we talk about, one of the trends around internal mobility and having global workforce, that's something that is becoming more and more industry standards. And I know that for many of our organizations and for you here in the room, that's something that is already happening. But just to let you know, there are plenty of organizations out there that working from home is a foreign concept. Okay? So I'm not going to spend too much time on the multiple devices. How many of you have more than one device with you today? Brilliant. More than 3 devices? Okay, amazing. But that shows you a powerful story as well. So I bet all of you have mobile phone, and that's how you take notes, that's how you share, that's how you prepare for plenty of stuff. So just to let you know, I was putting the last edits to this presentation this morning on my mobile, right? That became a primary device. And as Scott mentioned this morning, that's something I observe every day I commute to work in London. On a tube, basically everyone is using the mobile phone, everyone. It doesn't matter what age they are, what gender, regardless, it's basically, gender agnostic as well. So, working from anywhere has become more and more industry standard that we observe at the moment, right? And that's something that those millennials who I spoke about that's the key expectation they have when they join any organization. So having that in mind, I'm lucky enough to speak to a number of decision makers and especially CIOs who are very much interested in a business transformation. And in general, digital transformation has become a trigger word to many of the organizations. So last year, we decided to survey our partners and customers, and we asked them, when you say business transformation, what do you actually mean by that? And based on the survey results, 4 themes emerged. So basically, when decision makers are talking about business transformation, they are very much interested in being more efficient, right? So how many of you are being tasked with or given a project that you're basically expected to do more with less, right? You're expected to be more and more efficient. And it's only through the technology that is becoming more intuitive, smarter, and anticipates certain actions and follows the patterns, like with machine learning, that's only possible for you to be more efficient, right? So in this case, technology actually plays the role of a key enabler for that efficiency. The next point is around innovation. So obviously, Google is very much famous for being a very innovative company. You've heard about the number of projects that our Google X division does. It's research and development of Alphabet. About driverless cars, we spoke about it. About Project Loon delivering the internet access. About Project Calico. There are some of the examples that they use the design thinking, we call it 10x thinking, to introduce breaking technology. But actually, what innovation means to many of the companies that we speak to and about the technology that we introduce, it's all about incremental changes. So having a closer look at the business processes people follow every day and taking those processes to the next level. Not each and every one of us is lucky enough to work on this 10x thinking, And we truly believe that there is a massive scope for innovation when it comes to business processes, right? So we kind of distinguish it between moonshots and roof shots when we talk about innovation. Another important aspect of business transformation that we observe at the moment is around collaboration. Oftentimes, companies are very much interested in improving collaboration and in communicating faster. Deloitte did a study recently, and they discovered that when people collaborate, they are actually 73% more innovative. They work 15%, they work faster, and 56% of them are actually more satisfied with the job that they are actually doing. So we don't work in silos anymore. For probably a handful of projects, you work as individual project, but it's more about collaboration and working as a team that we observe as, something that is emerging, especially recently. So having a technology platform that is going to enable you to collaborate, to have a single source of truth. And for example, I was quite glad to see that Scott uses Google Slides. Having a single point of truth and not X versions of the same document, for example, is already, a key milestone in terms of collaboration. And the last bit that emerged especially last year, I get invited to many of the HR conferences and talk about Google culture and share some tips and best practices. And while last year was all about attracting the talent, this year, what I observe is all about retaining the talent in the organizations. That's what most of the organizations struggle with. So basically, the employee engagement and making sure that the technology that the organization uses internally is being an attractive point for candidates to take a decision to join the organization is crucial. So what are the key things that we've seen recently as well? So I talked about the technology platform, how it enables the collaboration and the communication. One thing that companies are oftentimes interested in, and it's becoming a trigger word as well, is agility. How to be more agile, how to increase responsiveness to the clients they support, to the customers they support, and how to stay ahead of the curve of the competitors. So basically, as you can see on the right-hand side, there is a picture of the balloon. I'm quite happy, okay, this has changed, but during Scott's presentation, he had the balloon here. I thought I could easily plug into that. I didn't see that they changed the background here. But basically, that was the prototype of Project Loon, right? So what we're trying to do, as you all know, 2 in every 3 people in the world still don't have access to the internet. That's the fact we're facing. So with Project Loon, we basically came up with the idea that with the balloon, with the classic balloon, when we put it up in the air in the lower stratosphere, it's providing the access to the internet. And we're testing it at the moment in Africa and in certain parts of India. So basically imagine that, at the moment, 2 out of 3 children in the world don't have access to secondary education. So primary education is there, but secondary, we're still kind of lagging when it comes to numbers. So imagine if they could have an access to online education. Imagine if they could find answers to their questions online. Also, there are still communities that don't have access to doctors, to some decent healthcare. We already coined the notion of Dr. Google. People are actually searching for some symptoms that they observe, and before going to see a doctor, this became kind of a joke right now in the UK, because people, lots of British people think that healthcare in the UK is very clunky. I come from Poland. I think it's really decent. But basically, before going and seeing your GP, general practitioner, you would check some of the symptoms online first, right? And then not even mentioning that, for example, for farmers, if they could have access to the long-term weather forecast, they could be more efficient when it comes to their crops, etc. You can probably provide some more examples, right? So we just want to make sure that coming back to the technology, how it impacts, I just provided some of the other examples, but in the workplace, it's becoming a key enabler, not only to the access when it comes to access to information, but it translates directly into how you collaborate, how you communicate, and how efficient you are in the workplace. In order to achieve it, you obviously need to have a proper methodology in place, change management methodology, something I do on a daily basis, to prepare employees and peers to truly embrace it. So let's move on to the cultural bit right now. One of our partners, PwC, they revealed recently a studies on a culture and how it impacts the workplace. Because there is a parallel discussion that we observe. When we speak to CIOs, they come to us and they say, like, we want to have this technology that you're using internally. We want to actually adopt it in our organizations as well. But hey, there is another thing that we would like to do as well. Can you give us a sneak peek into your culture, and can we actually replicate some of the behaviors or some of the principles and plant it in our organizations, right? So here are some, statistics that I decided to quote today about the culture. And it's especially, the one on the right-hand side, as you can see, 60% of responders agree that culture is more important than strategy and operating model. So basically, probably Peter Drucker was right by saying that that's culture is strategy for breakfast, right? You start with culture to have the right strategy and operating model, not the other way around. So a little bit of numbers before I get to provide you with some more tangible sneak peek into our culture. As you probably know, we are a global organization, over 60,000 Googlers, as we call ourselves, globally. We had a massive cultural shift a few years ago when we acquired Motorola, when we grew within one day by 25,000 people. And then we started having plenty of discussions around the quality of managers in the workplace, about the culture that we are shaping. And I must say that after a few years, I'm still proud to say that we managed to maintain that culture, that, startup culture from the very beginning. So basically, one thing that I would like to share with you, that's Laszlo Bock. He's basically our right now ex-senior vice president of, as we call at Google, people operations. These are basically human resources. And he said this very important sentence that we really embrace internally. If you give people freedom, they will amaze you. And by freedom, he meant let them figure out how they want to use the technology, let them figure out how they want to approach projects, and never, by all means, micromanage people and try to get into providing some more strict guidelines. And that, I must say, has been, basically the foundation for our culture and still holds truth. I will talk about the quality of managers and some of the key characteristics towards the end of the presentation. But there are basically three tenets of Google culture. This is mission, transparency, and voice. So we have a very simple mission at Google. It's to organize world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That's just one sentence mission. And the fact that every one of us, every Googlers, knows that mission is not because we were nicely brainwashed during the onboarding period, during the first month, but it's actually being reminded every time we work on a new project, everyone needs to work towards sort of the same goal. So it's nicely being ingrained at each and every level, as much as we have very much informal informal atmosphere in the company. We still have levels, we're still very much organized. I will talk about it towards the end. But basically, in general, we really believe in that mission, and we believe that each and every project and each and every effort we make internally, we want to make sure that we're all working towards the same goal. So that's pretty important. Just to give you an example, a month ago, I had the pleasure to speak to HMRC, to basically Her Majesty Revenue and Customs, Cabinet Office, UK Cabinet Office is on Google Apps as well. And I was talking about this culture, and I mentioned the mission, and I said that everyone knows that mission. And they challenged me, and they said, like, you know what? Shall we leave the room right now and grab one of the Googlers, someone in the canteen or maybe someone in the hall, and can I actually test it? And I said, like, let's do it. I felt a little bit uncomfortable because I thought, like, fingers crossed they will know that mission. But they actually grabbed one of the Googlers, and he said exactly the same sentence. And we just had a discussion about it, and I'm like, this is something that you talk about. It's not that you have to remember everything by heart, but you know exactly what we are trying to do here, and it's kind of sense of purpose as well. So the mission and the vision for the organization is very important when you think about building a very powerful culture. The next tenet is around the transparency. We share a lot internally. We share a lot of confidential data. We totally trust Googlers. I'm not saying we are fully successful. There are some leaks and we face it. But in general, we know lots of things in advance. When it comes to product updates, product launches, we are also testing. We are being guinea pigs for each and every product feature and each and every product change internally. So basically, two of the examples that I would like to provide on this one. We've got the annual employee satisfaction survey. It's called Google Geist. We've got all the cheesy names. That we ask everyone how happy you are, and we can see all the organizations, how they perform, how healthy, how happy they are. What's interesting is that we share all the results of any organization internally with everyone. So even though I'm part of the Google for Work organization, which is slightly different to, for example, YouTube organization, I can still see, I have access to the data of how each and every team in YouTube scored in terms of employee satisfaction. We truly believe that it's a natural benchmarking for us, and we are also being very transparent about what we're going to do about the fact if the numbers are really low, or if the satisfaction level is really low. So we really action on it. Then another thing that I would like to mention as well is that we are being very transparent in terms of sharing our KPIs. When you Google, the numbers around Google, especially technology companies, you can see how many of things we share externally. Oftentimes, some of the bits and pieces and snippets from our, board members' letters, something that other companies don't do it. And then another thing that you are probably more aware of and benefit from than I do, the open source. By default, being default to open has become one of the key principles at Google as well. The last tenet is around voice. So if you let everyone see everything, the worst thing you can do is not to give them option to provide feedback, right? So we've got plenty of formal and informal channels that we use internally, starting from product updates. As I mentioned, we've got dog fooding, and also, for example, cafe menus, right? We call it foodback. So basically, plenty of channels that we can provide feedback on. What's actually very interesting is before each and every company-wide meeting, so for example, every Friday, our founders, Larry and Sergey, every Friday, they are on stage providing product updates for broader Alphabet organization. And we've got an opportunity for those who are based in remote offices, such as London, we have an opportunity to ask questions via our moderator. We call it Dory. That's the tool that we created ourselves internally. So we basically can see who's posted what question. You can post your own question, but all of us are upvoting or downvoting the questions. So at the end of the meeting, the most popular questions get answered at the end. And believe me, there are very uncomfortable questions in the organization as well that founders, they don't have answers for, and they are being very transparent about it as well. Okay? Just to give you an idea, there was a question around when we acquired Nest, and we paid $2 billion for that. There was a question from one of the Googlers in San Francisco, live question, what on earth you were thinking, paying that amount of money, investing in a business that I don't see a connection to either our mission, vision, where are we heading? And they provided a very comprehensive explanation, oftentimes with details that are very confidential, that we keep to ourselves, just to understand where we're heading and how we spend money, okay? So providing that platform for the voice is very important. Another initiative that we have in place is called Bureaucracy Busters. And it's all about our ex-CFO launched that initiative 4 years ago. So every year we basically vote on there is a list of processes that are clunky, that are bureaucratic, that require way too many approvals in the process. We submit them and we get to vote on them. So that 10 top processes, we build the workforces around them and basically re-engineer those processes. So we are very much encouraged on a daily basis to question the status quo and try something different. And I'm going to tell you how on earth is that possible with all the cultural bits. So in order to build a culture of innovation, collaboration, and great communication, you need to take a step back and think about the most important process that every company does, about hiring. Hiring the right people in the company is the single most important process that is going to give you the right foundation for your organizational culture. So at Google, for those of you who experienced the hiring process, it's a very lengthy process. It's very painful because it takes, a number of interviews. But basically, we pay attention to it, and we want to make sure that we hire for cultural fit. How is that possible? We basically screen for four key competencies. The first one is all about general cognitive knowledge, as we call it. So we just want to learn a little bit more how people learn new things, how they react to changing, shifting situations by providing real-life examples. So we are not really asking questions around, tell me about your work experience in the past and how does it match the role you're applying for. We want to know what was the thinking you applied in certain situations and how you dealt with challenging problems, with challenging situations in the past, and how you solve those problems. And it doesn't need to be an example from your work experience. It can be a voluntary project you were part of, or something basically completely part of your passion. That's absolutely fine. Another thing is around leadership. And by leadership, I don't mean tell me about the team you managed recently and how did you motivate your team. Leadership is all about taking initiative and being brave, being audacious, to challenge status quo. So tell me about the situation that you actually manifested that, and how did it end up? What were your influential skills? So at Google, by leadership, we mean we've got this type of leadership that is basically embracing leadership. It doesn't matter what level in the organization you are. You can be simply a new grad who just joined the organization, and you can still be a leader. Empowering others, supporting others, and being able to step up and say, this is actually not the right thing to do, let me challenge something, is the leadership that we are looking for. Then another thing is the role-related knowledge, which, as I said, is the least of the competencies that we are screening for. We are interested in your professional experience, but in general, we actually, don't want you to have one-to-one comparison with the current role. We feel that if you will be repeating the same pattern, you will probably leave sooner than 18 months in the company. And then there is the fourth one, my favorite one. It's the cheesiest name of all the names we have. It's called googliness. And by googliness, we mean what are your passions? What are the things you've done in your life to develop yourself? These are some other characteristics that come in a package. We don't have clearly defined that googliness, but once you join Google, you spend a little bit of time in our offices, you will see what type of people are working for the company. So those who are very passionate about something, those who travel quite a lot, are curious to see other places, but also those who navigate ambiguity and those who keep up with all the changes are absolutely okay with unknown. So just to give you an example, when I was applying to Google 8 years ago, that was the only interview that I spoke about playing saxophone and speaking Mandarin, and I was wondering, how does it actually apply to the role in advertising that we are talking about? But they were truly interested what kind of human being you are to make sure that you're gonna be, that you're gonna be fitting for that certain part, for that certain type of culture, okay? What happens on a regular basis? If when we hire for a certain role and we feel there are always 4 people involved. By the way, it's not HR hiring for us, they do the initial screening, but we are all involved in the hiring process. So when we hire, for example, to our team, there is someone from my team involved in that process as well. So we've got usually 4 people, 4 Googlers involved in the whole process, and we might come to the conclusion that this person is not a great fit for this particular role, but it's a great fit for Google overall. So that's the signal we send to HR. They keep the CV and they will search for another match. So that's something really, really important. So then, another thing is default to open, and I said quite a lot about it so far. So I mentioned about the KPIs, I mentioned about TGIF, it's called Thanks Google, It's Friday, the company-wide meetings where all employees can ask all the questions. But there is also something like a feedback. Something I mentioned before was about the product launches, some of the initiatives, the feedback that we can provide. Another thing that we've got in place is around our performance. We've got something called real-time feedback tool. So the way we are being assessed internally is all about that real-time feedback. I've got a tool when I can actually provide a feedback about my colleague. Let's say we just attended one of the customer meetings or we attended one of the events, and I think he did a brilliant job at certain things. And I want to provide that feedback. I don't have to wait until the next performance cycle to give that feedback to his manager or her manager, but I can actually log it in, and that's going to be visible in his profile. So that's a pretty powerful thing. When it's still fresh in your mind, you're providing that feedback. And also there is a number of other, reward and recognition system in place. We've got peer bonuses, but we've got also kudos that are for free. We basically recognize someone, but you're writing a nice note that is being shared with everyone. You use G+ on a daily basis, the social platform that we share all the news about someone doing a really good job. So when it comes to innovation, so as I mentioned, there is this division of Alphabet called Google X, and they are perceived as really innovative because they work on those driverless cars, they are developing Calico and other projects that are really, really interesting. But we truly believe that innovation comes from everywhere, and we've proved it in the past. Gmail was, for example, created by 2 Googlers who were account managers in Paris. They were just playing a table tennis, and they just figured out that we should have our own tool of managing messages, and that's how Gmail was born. With the cardboard story, probably you heard that story many times before, so I'm not going to repeat it. If you're interested in more details around the cardboard, let me know, and I'm more than happy to share it during one of the coffee breaks. We truly believe that innovation comes from everywhere, and that it doesn't matter what you do, what your role you're dedicated to. We've got this option of 20% time dedicated to the project that is not related to your role. So there is the whole marketplace for those projects. We know exactly on annual basis what kind of projects will be launched for the next year, and we can apply for those. So if that's something completely unrelated, but you want to develop yourself in certain direction, then that's possible to do it as well. And then there is another concept of transformation labs. Transformation labs are basically half-day workshops that are based on the Stanford University design thinking principle. And basically we've got innovation, it's a simple framework. It's innovation, there is exploration of the processes, prototyping, and the roadmap. So basically we take all the clunky processes, as I mentioned, from the bureaucracy busters into consideration. We think how we can possibly re-engineer them, or if they are really clunky and we want to create another process from the scratch, we do it on a regular basis too. And then we building prototyping, all within this half-day workshop. We build prototypes and we test it for the next 2 weeks. If it works, we apply it. If it doesn't work, we're failing fast and we're moving on to the next one. So Transformation Labs is the concept that we are at the moment offering as part of the standard change management methodology. When companies go in Google and adopting Google Apps, we actually running those transformation labs to stimulate innovation and to trigger that out-of-the-box thinking among employees. So failing fast is another thing that we actually embraced internally. There is a graveyard of Google projects and products on Pinterest. So you can see there is the whole wall of products that didn't really work out or were a clear failure. As you can see, here is the prototype of Google Glass. So the basically philosophy of launching, iterating, and failing fast if it doesn't work is part of the DNA of Google culture. How does it translate to the daily work? Basically, when we focus on a project and we see halfway through or at the very beginning that it's not going to bring the benefits or it's not going to meet the expectations that we thought that's going to deliver, then it's absolutely okay for us to kill it. It's not going to have any reflection in your performance. It's absolutely okay to say, you know what, I actually put this case for change or justification for this project that I thought would work in theory, but in practice, we're not moving as fast as I anticipated. And it's absolutely okay to say, I'm going to leave it for now, park it there, or just kill it, and move on to the next one. So we are all encouraged on a regular basis to try something new. If it doesn't work, it's okay to fail. Think about the companies or your customers who you're supporting. How many of them could say that it's absolutely okay to fail? How many of them would say that it's absolutely okay to basically put the justification for your project and halfway through say, I'm not going to deliver it? Okay? That's a certain type of culture. And again, once we have a failure, once we have the project that we decided to kill, there are some lessons learned, and we make sure we want to draw it for the next project that we are embarking on. What I do on a daily basis, I support external customers. Oftentimes, when I speak to change managers across the world, they think that my role is actually internal. But guess what? We don't have any change managers internally. We don't have a dedicated team supporting our employees with embracing change. We basically make sure that when we hire people for that cultural fit, that they will know how to keep up with the fast-paced environment and also adapt to changes. So we don't spend too much time complaining about the old status quo, because we know we need to be ready for the new one, and we need to actually adapt fast. So that's the culture as well. Okay? Navigate ambiguity and embrace unknown, especially when it comes to projects that you've been tasked with or you came up with, that you cannot really, put the whole stack of numbers to justify it. That's still okay. And the last thing that I would like to mention is around the manager and quality, about the managers and the quality of managers. So our founders in 2002 Larry and Sergey, they experimented and they introduced a flat structure in the company. They thought that maybe managers are actually not needed at all in the organization. And only when people started getting to Sergey and Larry with some of the expenses and some more, down-to-earth, trivial things, they figured that maybe managers have a role to play in the organization. So we started having more and more discussions about the internal enablement of the managers. And in 2012, we launched a multi-year program called Project Oxygen. There is a Harvard Business Review article about it, so it's a public knowledge. And we basically started analyzing exit interviews, and we wanted to find out how many of those people who are leaving Google are leaving because of bad management, because of their managers, as it's usually the key factor, factor number one for people leaving the company, by the way. And once we started analyzing, we came up to some of the conclusions that there is a massive need for us internally to introduce a proper coaching and a proper training for managers to make sure that we keep up with the industry standards and actually with the cultural standards we set for ourselves. So as a result of this Project Oxygen, we came up with 8 top characteristics of being a good manager. Some of them include, the first one is all about being a good mentor, being a good coach to your team. The second one is about empowering your team and making sure you don't micromanage. And there is one that tells you a lot about how to be an effective communicator and not really focus on your personal objectives, but making sure you're doing the thought leadership and empowering others and your teams as well. So if you're interested, there is an article about it. I can provide you with the link as well. It's a very interesting study to read. What's also very important, based on that Project Oxygen, we introduced a very holistic program that includes some of the trainings that we actually pair up with Chartered Institute of Personal Development, especially in London. And we basically provide, we've got third-party providers for the training for managers. So we want to make sure that they are actually doing a really good job and stick to some of the principles we have in the company, we set up in the company. And then there are some other things that really do matter. G2G is another cheesy name. It's basically Googler to Googler. We've got the initiative of peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, skills sharing. So you can find there is basically a Grow initiative that's all about training, where you can find not only professional trainings that you can sign up for example, basics of project management at Stanford University, but you've got also some of the other stuff, like, for example, Mandarin classes or yoga classes that people deliver in order to make sure that you're sharing it for free internally, all right? So it's very mutual, and this is actually growing at the moment very fast. Another thing that is very important, in order to retain that talent internally, you need to provide people with options, with some other opportunities internally. So internal mobility is a big thing at Google. After 12 months in a role, after 1 year, you can apply for another role in different location, in different office, in different team. We want to make sure that we retain smart people internally, and that's the only way to do it. There are some other things that I'm not going to spend for the sake of time. I'm not going to spend too much time, but just to let you know, you don't have to have a fireman slide in the office to have a collaborative environment. Having this, open space environment where people don't necessarily need to sit at their desk, where we are, by the way, the least innovative, it's very important to give them a little bit of fresh breath with some more collaborative spaces internally, if you have the office. And some of the top tips, you can read them all. I don't have to explain. This is a nice summary of something I've already mentioned. One thing that I would say is have fun along the way. This is very important, an ABC for every change management activity. If you want people to be engaged, if you want people to join your initiative, you need to make it attractive and fun. By the way, we learn more efficiently through very fun and interesting way when we are faced with different projects. And with that, I would like to leave you with a famous quote of Einstein. Thank you very much for listening, and have a lovely day today. Thank you. Do we still have time for questions? Okay, we still have time for questions. If you have any questions to the content, yeah, we've got one question over there. If you can just hold on for a second, we're going to give you the mic. Brilliant. Thank you.
So you spoke about a flat organization in Google.
Yeah.
Do you know about any other companies that also use a flat organization?
Yes, I know Facebook. I know for a fact we've got lots of friends at Facebook. At Facebook, they experimented with that as well. Experimented. They didn't introduce it. They experimented in Dublin, in their office, in the headquarters. They experimented to have a flat organization a few years ago, but it didn't work out in the end. They were trying to outsource some of the admin staff to the HR and have separated teams managing some of the admin things. But when it comes to self-development, they came up to the conclusion at the very high level, what I've heard, that it didn't really work out.
So, but there's a company that I experienced their culture, and it's Valve. They also have a flat organization, and they founded like 2 years before Google, and it actually worked out for them.
Oh, amazing.
So if you could kind of tell us why did it work out for them and not for Facebook or Google?
Well, I don't know all the details and all the background. I can just tell you what happened. You know, I've got inside information, what happened at Google and what were the key reasons. I think the smaller organization you are, the more likely you can introduce the flat organization. But it also depends, I guess, if you have people doing similar role and not really diversified crowd, then it's probably easier. For Google, as we were growing, we had lots of diversified teams, and basically it was harder for us to have this flat structure. The time that Larry and Sergey experimented with flat organizations, we were purely engineering company at the time. So as you know, at the moment, we've got engineering part and the business part of Google. That is, slightly two different animals, but there is a need to actually have managers in place. But I know and I can anticipate that it's easier for engineers to have a flat structure rather than for business people, because then it's becoming a little bit more about, supporting external customers directly, where you need to have managers involved. But these are some of my anticipations.
So another question, you mentioned that you have an internal moderator for your questions.
Yeah.
Is that similar to what Google Docs actually use? Like when the presentation you wrote for the Google Slides actually integrates the Q&A, is that the exact same system?
Exactly. We only have more robust reporting around it because we can see what events we hold globally and what are the questions. We've got it documented as well. And also you can see, you've got analytics pinned to that. I'm not sure what's on the roadmap for the slides, but definitely it's exactly the same interface that we use for internal moderator, and that's how we started.
Thank you.
Good link. Yeah. We've got another question here. Can we get the mic?
We have the mic.
Oh, you have the mic.
Sorry.
Brilliant.
So Google seems like workplace heaven, but I'm sure that there are employees who left the company.
Yeah.
What did you learn about your culture from the people who left Google?
Yeah. So as I said, based on the analysis and in the article Project Oxygen, you can find plenty of insights, by the way, plenty of results. And I guess it's not only typical for Google, it might be, kind of similar to any other tech companies. The factor number one why people leave Google is because they're setting their own companies. They decide to pair up with some other Googlers, as it happens on a regular basis, and they decide to set up their own startup and go their own way. That's the key thing. But there is also, I'm not going to lie, it's exactly the same, people either join similar companies like Facebook, join other companies where you've got a similar culture, and let's face it, in terms of perks and benefits and everything, it's actually matching the industry standard. But they are just looking for a little bit, fresh air, which is absolutely understandable. But in terms of the turnover and tenure of plenty of our employees, apparently Google has got the highest one among all the tech companies. So you can actually check, this is a public data. I mean, Forbes, when they did the top employer of the year, we've been voted last year the sixth year in a row, top employer in the US. You can find lots of data over there, what kind of criteria they used to actually, you know, to vote for the best one. So employee retention, turnover is one of the things that they look at. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
So I don't know how to phrase this right, but the ratio of male versus female employees in Google, is that a problem? How do you go about it?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you for asking this question. This question is very close to my heart. So basically, the way I would answer this question is basically we are totally aware of it. When it comes to diversity, diversity is an important thing at Google. Something that in the past few years, we've got it as the company key objective. And by the way, Google was the first company disclosing publicly the ratio of female versus male employees. And it was shocking. Because the first number that we got in 2012 or 13 was 27% of females versus the rest of the organization. So we've got this OKR, it's a slightly more promising, it looks slightly more promising in the business side of the company. It's still lagging in the engineering side. So there are plenty of initiatives that Google supports at the moment. You know that education is something that you need to start with, right? We basically don't have that many women with skills needed to fill in the roles. So there are plenty of initiatives we do. I traveled to India at the beginning of August this year, and I wasn't even aware of the efforts we're making over there in investing money and supporting females joining universities and learning how to code. So for girls, there is a massive initiative as well to keep them, you know, to involve them in coding and learning, you know, more about the computer science. But basically at the moment, I think we're just lacking, you know, a number of women with certain skills are simply lacking. But we are getting there. There are certain things that you cannot really, certain challenges you cannot really overcome. Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, look in this room. That gives you quite a powerful story. One more? No questions? Thank you very much for attending. I'll be around the whole day. Thank you.